Hello there, it's Deborah Irene with Storytime. If you remember, I have been reading stories and lessons from my mother, Helen Herbert Gillum, from her book Helen's Heritage, as well as some stories from my other two books, Reflections and Someday I Will Write. We've been focusing on the back of my mother's book, the last section called The Clan, where we pay tribute to all of her siblings and her mother and father. We've already read the chapters about her father, James Bernard Herbert, and her mother, Rhoda Margaret Case. So now we're ready to start reading the chapters on the 16 children, starting with the oldest child, Elizabeth Leona Herbert Ballinger. Most of us knew her as Lizzie. So I'll show you this picture of her first and hope that you can see. We tried to put a younger picture and then an older picture. So the older picture has her three children, but they are all adults there, young adults, and her husband, Freeman, whom we called Hike. And then the older picture is after Uncle Hike had passed away, so it's Aunt Lizzie, her children Margie, Lee, and Mavis in their older years. So let's read about her. She was a very special lady, just like everyone was. She was special to many people. The firstborn child of Bernard and Maggie was a girl, Elizabeth Leona. She was born on February 11, 1905, and passed away on August 23, 2001, at the age of 96. My goodness, I just realized today is the anniversary of her death, August 23. I just now noticed that. So she's been gone if August 23, 2001, and this is August 23, 2021, so she's been gone 20 years now. She lived a long life. At the age of 96 is when she passed away. She married Edward Freeman Hike Ballinger and gave birth to 5 children. But she knew the heartache of bearing a child. 2 of her babies died, a boy and a girl. Now remember, that's my mother speaking, not me. It's my mother's voice. I was named after the baby girl, Helen Ruth. She also outlived her adult son, Lee, and a grandson. I was born the month before she turned 29. I stayed with her much while Poppy worked long hours when I was growing up. Sometimes Harold and I lived with her for 2 or 3 months at a time. She joked and said that about the time she had us straightened out, Dad came and got us. Harold started school while staying with her. I wasn't old enough, so we made cookies while the other kids were in school. She rolled out the dough and I helped cut the cookies, and she always made bread. She made many of my clothes when I was a little girl. In many ways, she was my mom for a very long time. Lizzie was the kindest, most loving person. I never heard her complain. She worked hard and didn't always have fancy store-bought things, but she never complained. She was resourceful like the Proverbs 31 woman. She picked walnuts and gooseberries, whatever was in season, and sold them. She also earned money sewing for people. Lizzie always produced a big garden and worked hard at it. She made curtains and bedspreads, practically everything in her home. She had a hard country life, but was happy and kept everything spotless. Lizzie never said anything bad about anyone or spread rumors, true or not. She was a wonderful Christian woman who loved the Lord, even though she was not able to attend church on a regular basis for many years because she lived in the country with no transportation. She never drove or owned a vehicle. When she moved into town later in life after Hike died, she went to church at every opportunity. There were more transportation options in town. As an adult, when I first left California and moved to Arkansas, we visited family on the weekends in the Bolivar area and most of the times went to Lizzie's house to spend the night. We had so much fun. She was just like my mommy. My girls called her Aunt Lizzie, but she was more like Grandma Lizzie. I loved her so, and she was a wonderful person. She died at the hospital in Bolivar. Her daughter Mavis and I had spent the night with her. I went home when Eunice arrived and had not been home long when Eunice called with the news that Lizzie had passed away. No one wanted to give her up, not even when she was 96 years old. And her children were Marjorie Luella, known as Margie, born in 1923. She died in 2003. Lee Edward, born in 1925, who died in 1998. James H., a baby and infant, born in 1927 and died in 1927. Mavis Irene, who is still living, born in 1928. And then Helen Ruth, whom my mother, Helen Josephine, was named after, was born in 1930 and died in 1931. So she lost two little ones. I loved my Aunt Lizzie too, and I'm going to take the time to read you a story that I may have already read, but since it's about Aunt Lizzie, I just have to read this one too. And this is my voice and me speaking from my book, Someday I Will Write. It is in the section, A Time to Remember, the first section in my book, and chapter 2, and I call this A House, a Home. I have to tell you that this was published, a version of this story, in the August-September 2016 issue of Country Magazine as Heart of a Home. And it was really funny. My cousin Sherry was at either a doctor's appointment or a beauty appointment and picked up a magazine to read, and guess what it was? It was this story that was really exciting. So, and I was excited to get this published in a national magazine. And so I hope you enjoy this story, A House, a Home, talking about my Aunt Lizzie, my mother's oldest sister. A house can be a house, or a house can be a home. A house is made of wood, brick, or stone, but a home is made of memories, stories, and love. I am writing today about the latter, a home. I remember when I first met this home. It was my Aunt Lizzie and Uncle Hike's home. I remember looking at this picture frequently growing up in California as Mother talked about the two of them. This picture was taken in the early days of their home ownership. They moved into their new house on New Year's Day, 1937. This is a really old picture, but perhaps you can see that's Aunt Lizzie and Uncle Hike. He was always making a funny face. So they moved there New Year's Day in 1937. Over the next 25 years, by the time I first visited, the two of them transformed this into a much adored home. When we moved to the Midwest in the mid-60s, this home became like my grandma's home. You see, Aunt Lizzie was my mother's oldest sister, who was 29 years her senior. So my Aunt Lizzie was more like Grandma Lizzie. This was not like other houses we had left behind in modern Southern California. It was located 6 miles into the country off the highway on a dirt road and up a rocky driveway. There was a well a few feet from the back door that yielded fresh, cold water. I learned the meaning of drawing water as we lowered the bucket down into the well and pulled it back up by the attached rope. There was an outhouse instead of a bathroom, and a rooster who attacked you as you walked to the facility. And just ask my cousin Pam about that. I think she got attacked more than anybody. You had to run fast to protect your legs from his painful pecks. I don't know why he couldn't stay in the chicken coop and keep the hens happy. Which brings up another thing. Eggs were collected from a real live hen house rather than buying them in the grocery store. Imagine that. In some ways, we were such city slickers. Then there was the cow that Uncle Hike patiently tried to teach me to milk. I think her name was Bessie. I either didn't have the strength or didn't have the technique, but he always managed to fill the bucket full every morning and every night. He delivered it to Aunt Lizzie, who knew how to get the most out of each bucket. We had fresh whole cream for coffee, and she taught me to churn butter. Sometimes we had buttermilk, and in the summer, we made homemade ice cream. After we milked the cow, we shucked corn so that mean old rooster and the hens would have something to eat. Sometimes I simply sat and watched Uncle Hike whittle away his worries. That wasn't something I saw in Southern California either. Each year, Uncle Hike hid his watermelon patch to keep the brazen teenagers from vandalizing it. He would say, "You know, I wouldn't care if they only took a watermelon and ate it." But they made a game of it to find the patch and destroy every melon. Not funny. I remember that I tagged along on strolls of the property and neighboring property to search for arrowheads. Occasionally we found one, but I think Uncle Hike had already confiscated most of them, judging from the number he had mounted in frames all over the walls of the home. When we returned, I helped Aunt Lizzie prepare lunch, and then she showed me how to make a peach or apple pie from scratch, which I never did accomplish very well. But my favorite thing to do with her was to wake up early before anyone else and help her fix breakfast for everyone who had slept over the night before. Biscuits, gravy, eggs, pancakes, sausage, bacon, the works. She did most of the fixing, and I usually set the table, and what a beautiful table she could spread. Uncle Hike had his special spot at the table with plenty of room to hike one leg up on the chair, rest his elbow on it, and perch his coffee in the same hand. So have you figured out how he acquired his nickname Hike? A brisk breeze blew in from the bedroom and made up for the lack of air conditioning. After dark, you could hear June bugs slam against the screens, crickets chirp, and various other critters that I could never identify. Now, these are my memories. I read this story to Mavis, Lizzie's youngest daughter, who's still alive, years ago when this got published in a magazine. And she told me a funny story about the house when there were no screens on the windows and flies would get in, and how they would try to get the flies out of the house at night so they could sleep better and the flies wouldn't be biting on them. And we laughed over that story. And of course, in the morning, we awakened to the crow of that aggressive rooster and the elegant singing of the birds. Uncle Hike taught me to listen to one in particular whistling, wet year, announcing it would rain that day. Please don't mistake the lack of a few modern conveniences as uncomfortable. Aunt Lizzie decorated beautifully and kept the home spotless. I loved her white curtains. Flowers and shrubs were abundant in the yard close to the home. She was the epitome of Proverbs 31. Many of these reflections were created with others. You see, I spent most of my time there on the weekends traveling up from Arkansas with my mother and sisters, and my cousin Lee, more like Uncle Lee, brought his family down from Kansas City. We all converged there for the weekends until we all ultimately moved to the area. About the time there was much excitement with plans for indoor plumbing, running water, and a bathroom for the home. I have shared my memories, but everyone in my extended family could write their memories because Aunt Lizzie was mother, grandma, great grandma, aunt, and great aunt to many. It was the place to go for Easter, 4th of July, Memorial Day, and any and every ordinary day. No need for notice to drop in. There was so much life in that home, and as goes the circle of life, so there was death. This home that brought so much life to our family was the passing place for some as well. Amy, our matriarch, Aunt Mert, Grandpa's sister, Uncle Hike's sister, my grandma, or my mother's mother, and Aunt Lizzie's mother, Rhoda Margaret, known as Mag, and finally Uncle Hike. They were brought home to transition to their heavenly home. After Uncle Hike passed away and Aunt Lizzie moved into town, Cousin Lee and his friendly wife Charlene moved into the homestead. She made everyone feel loved and special. They carried on many of the same traditions with their family. Charlene continued to make this house a home after Aunt Lizzie and Lee both passed on. It became Granny's house to her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Every Sunday, her entire family converged the way we had 40 years ago and 3 generations earlier. Then, without warning, 1 year ago, Granny slipped away from us. Now, I say 1 year ago, so this was written originally as a blog in 2011. So that's been 10 years. Granny slipped away from us, such unexpected loss and sorrow. The family still assembles, seeking that at-home comfort and security. They gather on Sundays, clinging to that home, the memories, the love, the unity. And I wonder, who will make memories for the next generation? As the lights are turned off, will we hear, "Good night, Grandpa. Good night, Grandma. Good night, sister"? And you thought that originated with the Waltons? No, that was my cousin Rita. And Rita did that. We would all be sleeping, some of us on the floor, a few of us in beds in different rooms, and Rita would say good night to everybody in the house after the lights were turned out. And then Stephanie, her daughter, wrote this poem that I put at the bottom. It was so fitting after her granny passed away suddenly. Turn off the lights, lock the door. No one lives here anymore. No more kisses, no more hugs, no more spoken words of love. Tears start falling one by one, trying not to come undone. Whisper goodbye, shut the door. No one lives here anymore. Written by Stephanie Coleman Bradshaw, 4th generation. The home awaits the next generation. And I'm pleased to say there is somebody living in that home, Jerry, who is the grandson of Lizzie and Hike. He is making that his home. So there are more memories being made in the home that Lizzie and Hike built. My mother's oldest sibling, oldest sister, Elizabeth Leona. We're reading this on the anniversary, the 20th anniversary of her passing. We miss her, just like we miss my mother. It's Deborah Irene with Story Time. It's stories and lessons from my mother.